Hello everyone. Welcome to another episode of Kabalanur Christ in Our City podcast, where we talk about conversations that matter for the Christian soul. Today we are going to talk about a book called Pilgrim's Progress by John Bunyan. The reason we picked up this kind of a setting or this kind of a podcast is we want to highlight the importance of reading, not just in our academics, but also books that are outside of our academics. So, and also we want to encourage to develop this culture of reading. It is developing slowly, but just to pick up the pace a little bit more. So we are going to talk about that book, and also we are going to talk a little bit about reading as well. So there is going to be a lot of things all galot together. So today we have some friends with us, and she's Anand, Akok, I'm Bundang, and this is Asen. And we are going to be talking about a lot of things. Asir tanda chimbish nabaya, awag ya chimbiz, English ya chimbiz, Monsana aruz, and in some we will even put Nagamis, so it's going to be a galo. And then we'll try to keep it as casual as possible. So hope at the end of this podcast you will be interested in reading. Maybe start with a book called The Pilgrims Progress, and then I'll not talk much about the book. I'll let Akok do what the book is about, and then we will kick off from there. We'll just discuss a little bit about, and then the things that happen in the book, a little bit from here and there, and then after that maybe we'll see what goes on. Yeah. So thank you guys, thank you ladies for coming, and then now Akok, if you want to share a little bit about the book.
Okay, I'll just describe the book in very simply. So, The Pilgrim's Progress is a book by John Bunyan. So it's widely and popularly accepted as a classic Christian literature. I'm sure many of our readers know about this book also. But this is a very important book because it is an allegorical book that chronicles the journey of a character called Christian. Okay, from the city of destruction to the heaven, that is the celestial city. So this book is very important, in the sense that, if you're a Christian and then if you read it, then I think you'll be able to relate to it. It's our journey, allegory in the sense that it represents our journey. So that is in simple words that the book is what the book is about.
Yeah. So shall we get into the book?
Sure.
Yeah, the book is about. I really like how it begins because Bunyan writes it in a kind of like a dream, and then. So when he writes like that, there's a possibility of a lot of things that can happen. And then I like the brilliance of how he brings about the characters as well as the narration, and then how he weaves the story into bringing about so much truth and then so much things. And then the entire time I was reading this book, I was like, it will be so so there has been a lot of things that strike me, and then there's been a lot of things that what do you call, spoke to me, and I was really blessed by it. So let me start. If sure. Yeah. I really liked. I never when I heard about this book, I heard that it's a wonderful classic Christian literature, and then it has been on my list for a long time that I wanted to read. But when I finally picked it up, I never guessed that it would be like this. And then when he starts with the name Christian, so I was like, okay, this is that kind of a, I mean, itu inala type, imalado anaya ta pilmaliaba aliba, and then he goes about Christian being burdened. So I was like, okay, starting to think now, and then after that, he brings about the Christian living in a city, and then it really got my attention when he writes that he was living in a city of destruction. That's when I understood that it was written in a very allegorical manner. And then from there on, I was really, really hooked into something. So, but I think I'm going too fast here. Before we do that, what made you read this book, or what are your, how do you maintain your reading schedules, or what's your reading pattern, or what are the books that you like? If you can talk about that first.
Okay, I'll just start. Usually when I read, if it's a narrative, I tend to go really fast. But with this book, I found that I couldn't go as fast as I wanted, because at every sentence I wanted to look up the references and what the deeper meaning could actually be. So I think it took me a lot of time to read this and to digest it as well, because the plot is pretty straightforward, but the meaning that, you know, like it's more complex, like it has layers of meaning, so you can't just like run away with the book. As for the book itself, I heard it when I was in my bachelor's, and then my literature professor, he recommended us to read this book, but at that time, like, I didn't really pay attention, but I read this just recently, and yeah, like it's called a masterpiece for some reason. So I really, as I was reading it, I was marveling at how Bunyan was able to like bring together all these elements and the character and the plot and the setting, and he did it really well. And yeah, I really admire this book right now. So that's just what I'll say.
For me, I read this book as a part of my master's syllabus. So the first time around, I didn't pay much attention because I just read it as a textbook, you know. But the second reading, I learned a lot. And then, you know, W.H. Auden says that, you know, a good book is that book that reads you. So while you're reading the book, you know, that book is like, it's like it's reading me. So that was the experience. And for me, you know, reading, I love reading. So I don't know, like with all this, with all our busy lives, it's very difficult to make time, you know, to read all those. But I make sure that I at least read some portions from any book. Okay. Every day. Okay, I try to make time to read.
How do you what do you call that? Choose what to read?
It depends on my preference, whatever I want to read. But the thing is, when it comes to reading, I think you know, if it's the approach. If I want to read the book like with the motive that I have to learn something from it, then I think it becomes tedious. But you know, when I read the book for my interest, for my pleasure, I learn more. So I think for me, that's my approach. You know, people may have different perspectives and opinions regarding that, but for me, it's more of a pleasure. And I've always read books like that. So I read.
Has there been time when, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but has there been a time where you were you regretted starting that book and then you're not able to finish it? Or I mean, what's your reading journey? For me, there has been times when I just read because I felt like reading it. I start, and then for the few first portions of the book, I'm very enthusiastic, and then I'm like pushing myself to read. But eventually, I end up losing interest, maybe in the subject or maybe in the way it's written, or etc. etc. Then after that, I leave the book. Then that's the time when I feel, let's say, guilty a little bit because I was not able to finish that book. So there's many instances like that. I don't know whether you guys go through that experience or not, but for me, that has been something that is very recurrent in my reading pattern. So I don't know how I'm going to change that, but I'm trying.
Well, I think it's okay not to finish a book, right? It's fine if you're not interested.
Thank you for that.
It's okay not to read. You're not books you're not interested in.
If you don't like set aside a reading time, specific time. So like tonight, say you wanted to read from 10 to 11, but you do something else, so it becomes like that every night. So you lose track of the plot or whatever thought that you're reading the book, and then suddenly like one day you look at the book and you're disinterested. So like you don't want to like you want to like start over again. So like next time start go.
True.
So I think that can happen.
If we have to talk about regret, I'm still a beginner, to be honest, because I mean like I am blessed to have friends, maybe including you as well, to encourage actually reading. And if you have to ask me regarding preferences, ni preferences ta particular kacamale, I am someone who is like, hey, kitab itu balas puri sabina. I'm like, oh okay, puri sabo kina say. So that if regret to ahe, I'm like, okay, I think this is not my type. But said that, there are also other books which have really helped me. And Pilgrim, talking about this particular book that we are talking about, it was such a very good introduction to me, because like once I got into it, I couldn't stop like the chapter wise. I'm like, what's next? What's next? You know. So and like reading in itself, being a beginner among you guys, I'm really learning a lot, and it's something like Akok have just gave a quotation right now. a good book is
something that reads you.
yeah. So like it's really helping me, and I'm glad to just have this conversation with you all today.
Great. Thank you for saying that we don't have to finish a book. So there are so many unfinished books that I have, so I'm not going to finish them maybe. But again, I think there are a lot of people who want to start reading, but just can't get the momentum or the push to read. So I think, I don't know about you guys, but I think it starts with, for me, it starts with the will to improve myself. When I read, and then I'm not just talking about knowledge or anything, but just my life in general becomes, I feel better when I read more, and then I feel that I've accomplished something when I read. When I read something, I feel that they did not go to waste. So that's the kind of attitude that I get. I can't speak for everybody else, but I'm sure you will also agree with that when I say that when we read something, there's at least we have done something good in that day, and then which is very what do you call that, absent in our society. I don't know about, because people don't normally think about reading as something that you are doing for your self growth. Many of us, including me, I pushed reading, especially my academic books, because just for exams and everything. I didn't read it for something that will what do you call, help me become a better person, help me become a better thinker. So but wherever the journey is, I think it's very good that we start. At least we start, and then if we don't have anybody or any recommendations, I think the leaders are also very much open to have discussion which book we want to read.
Actually, on that note, I think especially for us Christians, we really should get into reading Christian literature, because I find that a lot of us are asking questions that you can easily find if you actually take the time to read. Especially there are so many good authors out there. So it's very important to like read and learn for yourself and prepare yourself. Like, why do you believe what you believe? You know, at least have an answer, because one day you're going to be asked a question, and then like you're going to be, honestly it happened to me, because when I was in university, and then I had a non-believer in our group,
Circle.
in our circle. So like, I was asked a few questions, and that time I still hadn't discovered Christian literature. So I don't know, I hadn't like, I wasn't at that point in my life where I was learning and seeking and preparing myself. So it's kind of like a regret for me to. Like, I always think like, if only I had been more prepared at that time, maybe I could have given a better answer. So it's just an encouragement. I think Naga youth especially should really read up on what they believe. They should like take stronger ground, because most of us are just like floating on the surface. And if world culture throws a question, and we're suddenly shaky, because we don't know, we don't have the answers. We don't have, like, we don't believe, we don't, have that, I don't know, how would you say? You understand, right?
That foundation.
You don't know what you believe. So like, it's really important that we read. Like, I would suggest my friends to start reading Christian literature. I suggest books sometimes. Maybe it's like not their interest, but I just
And then I think this book is a very fantastic book to start, to get started with Christian literature.
True.
I like the newer version where there's no all English. The first time I tried, I couldn't finish a chapter because it was very difficult. The English translation is very friendly, and then it's very simple. So I really like this new version. So shall we talk about a little bit about the book then?
Yeah, before we start that, this book is also, this book is available in the children's version also, right? So if it's difficult for you, then you can read the children's version first, and then you can, read the book, the original book, right? So you'll have more context.
I was actually thinking that I wanted to like read the children's version first, because even this has some old-fashioned terms, right? So I thought like I really should maybe first read the children's version, get the gist of the story, and then get
And then it's one of those books that will help you read the Bible also, because you
Yeah.
always
Yeah,
have to refer to
absolutely.
that.
Yeah, yeah.
sure.
So it's interesting. in
It's
that
it's a
sense.
That-
very
yeah.
excellent book
Yeah,
in that
that's
manner.
one of the reasons why I couldn't like progress
Yeah,
fast, because
yeah.
I had to like I wanted to look up the reference at every point, you know.
Great.
Mm.
So this book, shall we get into?
Yeah,
Yeah, sure.
It's about nisung ka patang ji Christian
Mhm.
asar pahindang takom journey.
Yeah, yeah.
And he was working in a field, and then he reads a book, and then it is from that book that he understood, or he was burdened with something,
Yeah.
and after that he want to move to that celestial
City.
city, and then he was living in city of destruction, and then he
Mm.
wants to go to that celestial city, and then it's the journey. This book is about that journey, and then he meets a lot of people and very interesting characters, very interesting people.
Mhm.
So I really liked the first time he decides, and then when he decides to go to the celestial place, he was mocked and jeered by
Yeah.
people, and then he was considered foolish,
Mm.
and then this was really touching to me. Why? Because I don't know, when I first started my Christian journey, I felt that I was the odd one out. I felt I was not the one who was fitting into my peers and into my things, because as a Christian you have we have to make choices that are not in accordance to what the world is doing, and then it is again in a way very biblical, right? I mean, Romans says, do not conform to the patterns of this world, but with the renewal of your heart live like a new creation. So that was initially, yes, it was very, because when you're a first Christian, new Christian, it's very easy to do that. Everything is very holy, and then everything. So that part, I really, and then when you're trying to be that, when you don't fit into your peers' mentality or worldview, it becomes a little awkward sometimes. I felt that. I felt they are mocking me or jeering me, and then Tito man holy. Pastor भी कुछ आ जाए जी, all of those sorts, no? But the beauty is, again, we will find it even in this book, is the beauty is the Corinthians talks about the foolishness of this, God's foolishness. Our wisdom is nothing compared to even God's foolishness.
Yeah.
I don't know, I have written it somewhere, but God will use the foolish things of the world to shame the wise, and then he will use the weak things of the world to shame the strong, and all of those things. So I held on to that. I was really like, it's okay. I might look foolish to the people in this world. I might look stupid and weak to the people in this world, but in God's eyes, I am strong. In God's eyes, again, it's not through my power, but through God's power. So that really helped me. And then when I read this, I was almost in tears, because it took me back to the years when I was going through that situation. So when he decides to take this journey, he was mocked and jeered, but I could really identify myself in that part.
Yeah.
That was beautiful for me. Really, really beautiful.
Yeah. I'm sure we all have something to say
Yeah.
regarding our journey reading this book, so we can talk about that.
I guess even his own family did not stand with him,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
When he tried to explain what he was going through. I think even for a lot of us, we may be the only believer in the family,
Yeah.
but the important thing is that you also encourage your family to turn to the Word, because
Which is very difficult.
which is very difficult. At first, they may resist, but it starts with small steps. I mean, that's just one, it's just something that, we could relate with in real life. Like, at least try with your family if they're not like Christians or if they're not believers. Important to like encourage your family no matter how hard it is, and they will turn on you sometimes, but I think you should persevere and with prayer go forward.
Addition to that, even here the writer writes about when Christians decides to leave the city and go, by city jang tukchma saga he decides to leave his family also.
Yeah.
And then that was, I think, if we imagine that it's heartbreaking. You have to leave your family and go somewhere else. But again, this is not something new that is coming out from the writer. It's written in the Bible. Luke, where in Luke 14:26 it says, "If anyone comes to me and does not hate his own father and mother and wife and children and brothers and sisters, yes, and even his own life, he cannot be my disciple." And then, when I first read this, in the Bible, I was taken aback. God, Jesus, are you saying to me, God, are you saying to me that I should hate my family? It doesn't make sense. But and then when Jesus uses this word, hate, it sounds very harsh, and then it sounds very, what you call, demanding. But that's what Jesus means. That the kingdom of God is so much more than what we have. That even forget about your relationship with your parents or your family or anything. Even your life, your own life, if you don't forsake it, then you are not worthy of going into that kingdom. So this is like beautifully illustrated in this journey that Christian decides to take. And then I'm not saying that we should hate our parents or hate our brothers or sisters, but that's the extent of how we cannot, my faith cannot take my family to. It has, everybody has to carry their own faith. So this was really wonderful to me.
I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but when it says hate, I think it would mean like, definitely the Bible encourages us to love our family, our friends, but when what they say is against what God tells you, then that's where I think this verse comes to application. No? When your family stands against what you believe to be what God tells you, you know, what true to the word. So I think that's really applicable there.
So
then he goes and meets obstinate and
pliable. Okay, I think for those who have not read the book, you know, the name of the characters are all abstract ideas, because since it's an allegory, so you have characters like pliable, obstinate, help, evangelist. Okay, these are all the name of the characters. So, you know, it also, when you read the book, you also get a lot of perspective, right, in the character that is portrayed. So, for me, you know, everything in the book is very relatable. But one thing that really affected me was the slough of despond, where Christian falls into. So, you know, John Bunyan has described it very beautifully. Okay, that slough of despond. So, Christian falls into it because of his fear, because of his doubts, right? So, we're not perfect beings, so we also have our doubts, and we have to square it. But if we are overcome with fear, then we fall into despair. So, this, for me, from my understanding, this slough of despond, it represents our mind. You know, and then you know, it also reflects on the choice that God gives us, right? So we are human beings, you know, and then we may face a lot of difficult times. We have certain situations where we cannot overcome it ourselves, right? So in that book, in this book, you know, when Christian falls into it, the character help, you know, comes and provides him help, and then he's able to get out of it, right? But many a times, what we have to understand from this is that, you know, no matter how difficult or what our life is, you know, help is always there. You always have that choice, right? And then if you don't get out of it, then that's on you. So here, the slough of despond is something like, even the heavens cannot fix it, right? Because it represents our mind, right? So we still have that choice. So I learned a lot from that. You still have that choice. Even in the most desperate of times, you still have that choice. Whether whatever the world says, you know. So God gives us that choice. So for me, I think that really affected me a lot. And then, yeah, that was very.
One interesting thing about that I noticed here is when the Christian and pliable gets into the slough of despond. Pliable gets out of that, and then he quickly turns away and doesn't even look at the Christian, and then he walks away. And then he is complaining that if in the beginning of the journey itself, if we are having this, then how do you promise me to have something that's good? And then for me, the thing that I could understand was, pliable was able to make that decision because if we notice, he did not have any burden.
Yeah. Yes.
Whereas Christian was carrying his burden.
Yes.
And then that's the thing with our Christian journey also.
Yeah.
It's easy to what you call that udang revival kanong masunu mo udang na camping kanong aya how isu niya ta akizak subajiko it's kamlar saka krut ka babunok no to carry the cross.
Yeah.
Or if we don't have a burden, then udang tilaka nung asunu udang I don't think it's for me. The arzubajo kangalang malalir na. So I found that very interesting, and then I think it happens with many of us also. That we are like yes, camping no more and everything else. We are like that, but it's only for that moment, and after that we just turn back to our old ways because we're not willing to carry that burden. And then if we find Christian, even if he was carrying the burden, he was able to come out of that pond. Right. So I found that very, very interesting, and then I think that's something that we need to really apply, carrying the burden.
Yes. Yeah, like you said earlier, I was also intrigued by the way the author have illustrated the characters. Many a times we are like just focus how simple a Christian life is. You accept Christ and that's it. Like even in your worst time, it's okay. Yeah, he is there. The hope and everything, he is there. But we don't really identify what is going around. And I'm so glad and happy. I cannot wait to again revise again and again to, But anyway, coming back to the point, how like this book help us to identify what goes within this Christian journey. What do we have to face? What are the things that comes along the way? And how as a Christian, as a true believer, how stern are we with our faith?
Yeah, when you were talking about pliable, like as soon as I read that part where he easily agreed to go with Christian, like I got really suspicious of the character.
Fishy.
Like this guy, like he's just agreeing too easily. Like something is going to happen along the way, and then like he just turned back so easily, like at the first, pitfall. But isn't it like the parable where the farmer throws seed? And the seed falls on rocky ground.
Yes.
It does grow, the plant, but like as soon as the sun shines, like it just dies because it didn't take roots. So that verse really struck me when I was reading this part, and I think so many of us are like pliable because
very true.
like you were saying, kem nongbo katalikara asunogi. We don't think about the cost. We don't analyze it, but we just driven by our emotions. Of course, the organizers are also responsible to a part how they call believers, but I think a lot of youths could be pliable,
Including ourselves.
Including ourselves at first, So we need to be careful about that.
And let's move on to the book a little bit more. He goes on, and then after that he evangelist comes and then helps him out and everything, and then he meets this very interesting character. What's his name?
Worldly
wise
man.
Oh my goodness.
Mr. Worldly Wise Man.
And then even the illustration in the book is very, he's like a very gentleman and all of those things.
Yes.
And then when I read him, I was like, when I read the name, this is going to get interesting. That's the first thing that came into my mind. And I really, worldly wise men, according to worldly logic, actually had some very good points to present.
Very convincing.
Yeah,
actually.
very convincing. And then he was saying like, you know what? Why are you carrying this burden? I will show you the easiest way to get rid of this burden. So why don't you just go to that? See, Christian was directed to go to that narrow gate.
Yeah.
And then, but worldly wise man comes after the something, and then he interrupts him, and then he tells him, "Why don't you go towards that direction?" And then worldly wise man points him to the city of morality.
Yeah.
And then he asks him to meet a person named
Legality.
whose son is
Civility.
civility. Interesting. The way the plot is created, and then I think we find ourselves there also many times, especially asno kajak takamnung Krista gizakerseln asno kajak role model kapusher.
True.
Na who should I follow or who should I want to be?
Yeah.
다스 부시당지 sometimes we find people who are trying to live, who are also Christians, outwardly looks like a Christian. Saka udang morally sound or morally good life kanang libaji.
Yeah.
And then he's trying to live his or her life legally. And then not actually living the true Christian life. So what I want to say here is it's easy, maybe it's a little difficult, but to have a moral life and a legal life, it's far easier than being a Christian.
Yeah.
Because being a Christian, you are asked to be vulnerable. You are asked, and then I think this is something that's missing even in our Christian life also. That when I'm saying that I'm a Christian, I'm saying that I'm vulnerable, which means I have to confess my sins not only to God, but also to people and friends. That's how we keep a check on each other. That's how. But many a times we want to appear too morally good, morally sound, and then we want to appear too correct, and then we want to appear civilized.
Yes.
And then all of us are fighting our own demons. We are going through that struggle and everything. And then we don't want to put it out because we don't want to be vulnerable, and then we don't want to show to the people that we are struggling with all of these things. And eventually this kills us. Eventually. And this is going to eat us. And then I think it's a small cancer that starts as a small cancer, and then eventually it becomes so big that we are not able to deal with it. And then I think this is something that many of us goes through. And then I've been living with that, and then it's still difficult to be vulnerable to people. But I think it's very important that we need to find somebody with whom we can be vulnerable.
Even for the character Christian, when he goes to morality, when he meets this legality and civility, his burden becomes much heavier. He's not able to, shed the burden because that's something only Christ can do, right? And then he instead of taking the narrow gate, he goes that way, and then it becomes more difficult. So, if you read through it, I think we'll learn a lot more.
What's the one thing that let's say in the first part of the book, what's the one thing that you will remember, or what's the one thing that itu kitab from Mugina. What's the one thing that you will?
I think there's not just one thing, right?
It's a lot actually.
It's a lot.
From the beginning till the end, it's like
it's difficult to choose. Difficult, but out of the top of your head, if there's one thing that you would. I mean, it might not be, but just.
From the book or from the first part of the book?
First part of the book. Let's not open the second part.
What else? I think there are a lot. But for me, I think it will be the slough of despond. Because we get stuck, and then we're not able to move from it, and then we're not looking around for help also. Our pride doesn't allow us to, go out and seek help. So, especially if we apply it to our time, we live in a time where we romanticize being stuck, romanticize despair, and then all those. But we can always reach out and ask for if help is provided, right? There's help here represents our fellow Christians and our fellow friends, right? Those who can help us. So I think in times of when we need help, we need to reach out, right? That's a choice that we can make. So I think we can lean on one another. Obviously, it's accepting Christ, believing in Christ. It's a personal thing. We have to accept it personally, but we have to lean on one another also. Look for each other. So I think I'll take that away among the many. I'll take that away from the first part of the book.
And
I can't choose. Because seriously, I could identify in every character, to be honest, bits by bits. I'm like, itu mo yung city So all of anyway. But yeah, I can also, not that I can also, but I also really relate with the slough of the despond. Like said, the kickstart is so fired up, but once you get discouraged with something or the other, you're like, I don't think it works for me. I don't think it's that easy. I don't think it makes sense to me. So I mean, I really relate to that part as well.
I don't know, maybe 2 points. First is where Pliable and Christian are starting off on their journey, and because of their carelessness, they fall into that swamp, right?
Yeah.
And then like actually there were steps that were provided, but
Yes.
they couldn't see it.
Mm.
So the steps, according to what I've read, they represent the promise of Christ.
Yeah.
So maybe like I don't know, what I learned from it is like when you're starting out on your journey as a Christian, it's very important to start out strong, read the word, because if you don't, you're not going to see that step in
Yeah.
in your life with all its, with whatever life throws at you, and
Mm.
you're going to like easily fall into the swamp.
Mm.
And then second would be how evangelist, when he meets a Christian, Mount Sinai, was it, that represented that mount where legality was living.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So evangelist tells Christian that there are three important things that like Mr. Worldly Wise Man did that was wrong. And the first, he tells about how he managed to convince Christian to like walk away from the path of
Yeah.
life.
Yeah.
And second is he made Christian hate or detest the way Christ. And then third, what was it? I forget.
Leading away.
Leading to
away.
death,
Yeah.
certain death,
Mm.
by heading to the town of village of morality.
Yes.
So so interesting, because if we're not careful,
Yeah.
it can be any of us
Mm.
that gets deviated on
Yeah.
our journey when we search for
True.
the easier way.
Yeah.
We can be easily led to like hate the way, hate Christ, and we can easily walk to the path of death. So I don't know, those are really interesting parts.
I think that came to my mind quickly, and then we have been discussing about this also. Not here, but some other time. Asno kajak akizikar kalan, udang akizakan ja, your burden will be light. Ajak asungja na everything will be good, everything will just be easier, etc., etc. And then sometimes that becomes the lure to get into to accept Christ.
Yes.
But many a times that's not the catch actually.
It's not.
And then when you live the Christian life, to be young and to be a Christian is actually the most difficult
thing.
thing to be in this world. It's like not everything is easy. Every single choice that we make, every single decision that we take, it reflects on who we are in Christ, and then that becomes the thing that's the bone of contention in everything that we do.
Yeah.
So it's not easy. Asnung jiodang akizganja kichamaser asoktungatkuser da. Of course, yes,
It does.
it is in a way, but it comes with a price,
Yeah.
and the price is, it's not easy as Mr. Worldly Wise Man says. So
Yeah.
the price is like what Jesus says: if you be my disciple, you have to walk through the narrow path. And you have to go through that where the path is difficult, and then you have to carry our burden, our cross, which is what Christian is doing in this book. So that's something that I was quickly reminded of. And
Just a thought for our for those who have not read the book. I'm just talking about the book in general. Okay. So like the coming to the cross. Okay. Confessing your sins, and then in the book, coming to the cross. That's just the beginning part, right? Him accepting Christ, and then taking the journey to the celestial city, that is heaven. That is much longer. That is much more difficult. You have so many obstacles to overcome, and then you have all these burdens, and then you have all these temptations, right? So I think if you've not read the book, and then you read the book, I think it will fix a lot of your misconceptions also about
Very true.
the Christian journey,
what
right?
it means
Yes.
to accept Christ, no? Because
Yeah,
when
so-
you do, like the journey starts there, like the actual, like
Yeah. Coming to Christ is just the beginning, even in the book also. But the journey, that walk we take, even for Christian, it's not difficult, and then the way is always narrow. The choices that he has to make is always difficult, and then the way is always narrow,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So
there isn't a single part where it's easy for him.
nothing is
Entire
easy.
book.
Yeah, I think in that sense also it gives us hope, right?
Absolutely,
That
absolutely.
It gives us
yeah.
the motivation also, to let's say in simple words, it gives us the hope that it's not us alone.
Yeah.
that we are facing. And if Bunyan has written such a book,
Mm.
then he has experienced it. He has already
See,
experienced it.
interesting thing that we can identify is look at this was written centuries ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
17th century.
Yeah,
century.
it was written in the 17th century,
Mm.
right? And it was relatable for people then.
Yeah.
It has been relatable to people for all of the centuries. And then, you know what I want to say is how universally, what do you call that? Apt
Universal.
is it for all of our lives,
Yes.
Yeah.
for every Christian.
Mm.
Like you are saying that you were impacted by that, and then I'm also saying that I was really moved by this and everything. So if for every Christian who is reading this, which means every one of us is going through the same journey in a way,
Yes, yes.
where we identify
Yeah.
the journey of Christian.
Mm.
And then I find it very astounding that it's a very what do you call, like you said, universal.
Yeah.
When I say universal, I want to bring to one point which I found very interesting, and then it is probably my favorite part of the book.
Sure.
I mean, when Christian in his journey, he finds this man who was in a cage, iron cage,
Yeah.
and then the way that person ended up in that cage is very interesting. And then when I read this, I was like almost in tears. Maybe let's say I cried actually, because it's amazing how our God works. I was going through a similar situation, and then when I'm going through a similar situation, I pick up this book and I'm reading it. So you can imagine how touched I was, how moved I was, and then I give all the glory and credit to God because He makes me read this. He brought my life to a journey where I'm reading this. So this guy, he was a good Christian, and he started off well before he ended up in the cage. And then the mistake when Christian asked him how you ended up there, then he says, I neglected to watch and be sober. I loosened the restraint that kept my lust in check. I mean, this is just terrific. I sinned against the light of the word and the goodness of God. So when we depart from the word, after in our Christian journey, that's when we give ourselves chances to be driven by the word. And the goodness of God. With each statement, his voice grew a little more troubled. And then he goes on to say, I have grieved the Spirit and He is gone. This really broke my heart. And then I was just there. Because there has been countless of times where I knowingly, and I'm not saying this, this is like me consciously, intentionally sinning against God, grieving the Spirit. And then I found myself like that person in that cage, just like sitting there. And then this verse was almost like me speaking to Christian. And then it really, really moved me. But I find, again, when I look at the Christian journey, I find the grace and the mercy of God. Just like the fact that I'm alive today, not dead, it means that the grace and the mercy of God is still evident in my life. And then this is just something this is something wonderful that I can say that has happened to my life by reading this book. So that's my favorite part.
Thanks for sharing.
And it was really moving for me. So I think we can talk enough. We can never talk enough about the book. But I think we'll stop there. For today. And then we'll encourage we're reading. I think wherever you can, encourage people to read this book. And then not just this book. I think we should explore.
Let's start with this one.
We'll start with this one. But I think we need to explore a lot. And then one thing that I find is why are we not working out as a Christian culture, Ladwi? Is because let's say you are reading, I'm reading, and then but we fail to live out that lifestyle of a reader. And not just as a reader, but we feel you and I are talking about being Christians, but we sometimes, many a times, we fail to live out loud the Christian life. And then when we meet, if I don't know you, and then if I were to meet you on the street and then have a conversation with you, will I know that you are a Christian as well? That's the question I think we need to ask ourselves. Are we living out that? Are we emulating Christ, or do we have the aroma of Christ within us? That when people pass us by, or when people have conversations with us, they see Christ.
I think one thing that we need to do is like we need to be really assertive about our faith, and not just hide it away. But like when you believe, just be bold and
Absolutely.
be confident in it.
Yeah.
Because many of times we shy away from declaring that we're Christians, especially when it comes to social media use. I've been seeing a lot of clashing examples, like if you say you're a Christian, then you need to leave it out, because more than you talking about the Bible to someone, your life is the greatest example of what Christ has done in your life, right? So people are seeing you, and I think as youths we need to be bold and we need to be unapologetic about what we believe in, because the world will like come at you with a lot of its ajikalila worldviews, like, but then that time we need
New
to be
age
ready
lifestyle.
to like be cancelled culture, we need to be ready to be cancelled for Christ.
Great.
I think last thoughts, just from this talk, I think just as a concluding remarks also, I think we live in a generation where everybody knows everything, right? So I think for me, from my understanding, I think we have to address what we know, because we know a lot of things but we don't address it, right?
Yeah,
So and then we have to understand what we know also. So I think knowing is not just enough. You have to understand, and then you have to address it. The problem, I think most of the problem arises because we are not addressing it.
True.
So I think we should also begin from there also. That's also one thought.
All right. Maybe I may be a little out of what we're discussing, but personally, I feel that as a person we should be stoked to like see how we grow also. So like said in the beginning again, I'm still a beginner, but this book was like, yes, I want to grow. That means I have to read. I want to grow. That means I have to find some people who loves reading and just come together and share thoughts. I think the learning in that conversation is so sweet. So, and I cannot wait to look forward for more of this kind of conversations, more of reading book, more of suggestions going through. So so I hope our friends watching will be at least encouraged. Maybe from me, from a beginner, to at least
maybe somewhat curious.
That's what to start with this book.
We can all say that we have been really blessed with this book.
Indeed.
Like mentioned earlier, more than this book, it encourages us to read the Bible more, or know the Bible more. So this is a really, in a way, a side way to read the Bible more. So
Yes, true.
It's like luring you in with
I mean, like you have to read the Bible in order to understand this.
And even the best thing is, you don't necessarily need to be an expert in the Bible to understand this. The things that are written here in this, the mentions of the Bible. So the cross references that are given here. So, but nevertheless, when we read this, we get a better understanding of what it is to be a Christian, and also the Bible in general. So because there are so many cross references about the Bible here and there. So that's something that I hope and believe that we can continue to do so.
Of course.
I think that's about it for today's episode. I'm sure we will talk about more of this stuff in the future episodes. Just a small note to the viewers watching from home or wherever you are. We really like the support that has been coming through for all of the things that Kaba Youth has been doing. And then we are looking forward to things that you would want to be featured in the podcast. I mean, it can be any topic that you want people to be discussing, or even you, if you would want to come to the podcast, and then just have a conversation and everything. You're most welcome to do so. And then if there's anything, nai chang rabat topic kalir, nai mentin rabat topic kalir, that's no udang. You can leave it in the comments, or you can message the leaders, or Instagram or Facebook or as no social media platform. Walang priyadang lirje, or any kind of a topic that you want to talk about, or any person that you want to see again sitting here also. That is also very much welcome. It has been a wonderful day, and then I'm sure you are doing well. And then if there's anything that you require as a support in prayer, or you want to talk about things that you are going through, then the leaders, and then I'm sure there's somebody who's always ready to talk about it also. So if you are struggling in your Christian journey, please pray that God will put somebody in your life that will help you get out of that place. And then if you read this book, surely God will help you get out of the situation that you are in right now. So thank you for watching. God bless you all. See you next time.